Just a few updates for today. So firstly, we've got, excitingly, there's a lot of programs that are about to open up. So especially related to fleet in particular, which is the topic of conversation today. So firstly, the Fleet Zero EV charging grant, which is offered by the Colorado Energy Office, is going to be opening up on September 15th, so a week from today. Highlighting right here, the program open date for the standard application round. That'll be open through October 17th. There's also an upcoming webinar for Fleet Zero. So if you go to the webpage, the webinar registration link is right here. We'll have a formal Q&A round as well. And I will put this in the chat after. So I've got the webinar link pulled up. And then also, if you're not signed up for the contact list, an email has already gone out to the contact list noting about the upcoming program opening date, and then another email will go out the day the program opens. So if you're interested, there's a link to the contact list. I will include it as well as the Clean Fleet Vehicle and Technology Grant Program offered by the Clean Fleet Enterprise and our colleagues, administered by our colleagues at CDPHE. And that program also will be opening on September 15th. However, it will be open up for an additional week beyond Fleet Zero. So as a clarification, Fleet Zero is for EV charging for fleet vehicles, whereas the Clean Fleet Vehicle and Technology Grant Program is for vehicles and technologies. You could apply to both programs, but they are separate offerings. And then also that program has a contact list as well. And then our Charge Ahead program at the Energy Office will be opening also on September 15th. So grouping all of these program offerings together. This program is for charging that is not for fleets. So for the public, for workplaces, for multifamily housing, for communities, that will be opening October 15th to October 17th. Same dates as Fleet Zero. We'll have an upcoming webinar also on the 16th. And there's a contact list for that one too. And then there is an upcoming webinar also. CEO is working together with the DOE Office of Electricity Energy Storage Program and Sandia National Laboratories for this microgrid webinar series. And the next one is coming up on October 9th. So I'll include this link in the chat as well. And then before I pass it to Resource Innovations, is there anybody else on the call that has any updates that they want to share? Okay. All right. Well, with that, I will pass it off to the Resource Innovations team. So I know Jake, Chris, Tommy, and a few others are on the call. They're each on the EV team at Resource Innovations, and they're going to share some information regarding fleet electrification technical assistance program design. So everything from what are options, benefits, costs, other considerations, and had a chance to chat with them beforehand about how we have a mixture of folks on the call, both from investor-owned utilities, co-ops, municipal utilities, and kind of speak to a variety of considerations related to program design, program offerings, first steps utilities can take, and then followed by Q&A. So with that, I will go ahead and pass it along to the Resource Innovations team, and then I will be adding a variety of links to the chat.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having us, Matt, and to this entire subgroup or this entire group having us. We're really excited to be here presenting y'all today and kind of talking about our experience with transportation electrification design, as well as some of the programs that we're running here in Colorado, lessons learned. We've been doing this for some time now, and I specifically brought some other folks in. So I run the Colorado Fleet EV programs that Resource Innovations currently implements. My background is not in fleet EV until the last 2 or 3 years here working at Resource Innovations, and so I wanted to bring on Tommy and Chris as well, who that's their full-time job here at RI. I kind of just help the programs be successful once they're up and running, and they're the real brains behind the design of these programs. So let's get into it. So what we're going to be talking about today, just kind of an overview of transportation electrification, design options for fleet electrification programs, considerations that utilities should be thinking through when they're designing out their own programs, and then going a little bit into the Colorado programs that we're currently implementing across the state. Just a really brief intro on Resource Innovations. We're a full suite utility side implementer, DSM implementer. So we work on, if a utility touches it, we work on it. We've run every single program type that exists really within the utility and DSM world, both from the advisory and evaluation side of things, all the way up through implementation, direct implementation. So we work on the back end, we work on the front end, we work in the middle. We're kind of all over the place in the utility world. And with that, I'll pass things off to Chris Crockett.
All right, thank you, Jake. You're making me very jealous with that headset. Like, your voice is coming in very crisp. I think I need to get one of those. Well, Jake, thank you for that intro. I think that was really kind to say I'm the brains of EVs. I've been doing this for about 8 years now, always learning a lot more. I think this space is just so interesting, right? Because it's evolving very quickly. So I know that the focus today is fleet electrification. I've been hearing folks talk about their titles and the programs that they're doing. So fleet is what I'm hearing. But I do want to talk about a couple of other programs and how it kind of sits in this ecosystem at Resource Innovations. So I do a lot of business development these days. My background, as I mentioned earlier, is in engineering. So I started off doing a lot of energy efficiency work, pivoted into transportation electrification about 7 years ago, and I've been doing it ever since. So been doing that really in that commercial and industrial space, and then really focus on utility programs. And it sounds like a lot of you folks are doing the same thing. So at Resource Innovations, we have a transportation electrification practice that is officially 3 or 4 years old, but we've been doing this work for over 10 years. But we eventually made like our own department. So I'm part of that. I lead fleet electrification, but then I have my hands in some of these other things. So we have 3 verticals mostly. We have community electrification, fleet electrification, and then grid optimization. So I'll talk about this a little bit more later in a later slide about how these kind of flow into each other, how they fit together. But just very high level, community electrification is saying, hey, I as a utility have an endowment to start the work. So that can be community grants. It could be starting to put in just charging infrastructure, whether that's at multifamily or commercial and industrial, or if it's fleet applications. So a lot of ways to think about that, but it's really a community first focus. My colleague Vanessa, who's not here, she really leads that. And then, as I mentioned before, I lead the fleet electrification work. And so what I'm doing is I'm designing fleet electrification programs. And I'm doing that alongside some of my partners like Tommy, who's on the ground floor actually running programs and giving me feedback about what's working, what's not. And so we tweak that pretty consistently. So we have a turnkey approach. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then lastly, grid optimization. So think about having all these assets in place. You already have all the charging infrastructure in place. You're seeing a lot of EVs on the ground. So you have a new load that's been added to your grid. So now you want to start optimizing that, planning around that. So some of those buzzwords that you hear a lot, V1G, V2G, V2X, right? I'm doing a pilot right now in Chicago focused on electric school buses. So that's a V2G pilot program. So that would fit under grid optimization. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Jake. Okay, so zooming in a little bit more on fleet electrification, which I think is the focus today, but just as a little plug, if you ever want to talk about community electrification or grid optimization, very happy to talk about that. My contact info is on the last slide. So when we're offering fleet electrification programs to utilities, we're thinking about 6 main things that we're trying to do, but the biggest thing that I'm trying to do at Resource Innovations is provide my customers, so those utilities, a turnkey program. And that means starting from the very beginning, from the ground up, when we're conceptualizing this program, all the way through to having everything implemented and then starting to move into that grid optimization space. So that's ideally how it would work. It would start from the beginning and then move to managed charging, V1G, V2G, V2X, right? So we offer a multiple things, right? We do that marketing, education, and outreach, which I have learned, and I think Jake and Tommy will echo this, that marketing and outreach piece, fundamental, crucial for these fleet programs to be successful. So we're offering that. We're doing that with a lot of the programs that we're doing right now. The ones that Jake and Tommy are leading, outreach is a big part of that. We have self-service tools. Those are being used a little bit. So just having like that option available, I think a lot of utilities like having that, right? Having some sort of interface where a customer can go directly to their website and just kind of play around with total cost of ownership. So those types of tools we offer. And then the real meat and potatoes of fleet electrification, which is that assessment piece. So we can do deep dives where we're, going into our spreadsheets, taking in all the data that we're receiving from your customers, and then taking those assessments and turning those into recommendations, EV replacements, charging infrastructure, site layout. All of those things are coming from that deep dive assessment. And then I know Swatch Labs is on here, so I don't want to step on your toes, but we also do offer a telematics approach too. So if you have customers who are using telematics, we can take in that data and do analysis that way and give an even more robust and deeper recommendation based on those. Next, you can do rebates. So those are things that we can process ourselves. So if you are wanting to have some sort of like make ready piece, so offering anything from charging infrastructure rebates or electrical upgrades, those are things that we can manage for you. And then, of course, moving into that grid optimization, we can help manage that. Let's move to the next slide. Okay. So last but not least, I just wanted to show you that there's like quite a few different things that we've done. I myself have done even more outside of these quals that we have here. So of course, resource innovations, as Jake mentioned, our focus is utilities. When I worked at my previous firm, it was a lot of commercial and industrial, so direct work with them. So one of the biggest fleets I did was AT&T, 50,000 vehicles across all 50 states. So that was a big program that I've done. So as a team, collectively at Resource Innovations, we've done quite a bit, right? So we've done that commercial and industrial, like strong touch. We've done direct to customer work too, like Rush University. We did a study in Chicago with them and put together a fleet electrification report. And then we have multiple programs with different utilities across the United States. I think I will leave it there. So let's move into program design options. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that we have these three verticals, right? So we have community electrification, fleet electrification, and then grid optimization. How I like to look at it and how I like to talk to utilities about it is that each of those are increasing in complexity, and we don't live in a perfect world, but in a perfect world, a utility would start off at stage one with community electrification and then kind of move incrementally down. And why am I saying that? It's because that first stage, that community electrification piece is a lot easier to start off with. You have a small budget. So for instance, Santee Cooper, they had a small endowment, maybe $100,000, $200,000. And they said, Chris and Resource Innovations, like, what can we do with that? So we recommended doing a grant program that really helps them get a temperature check for their service territory, understand what people are looking for by letting them come to Santee Cooper and say, this is what we want to use this money on. So kind of like opening up the field that way. Okay, ideally that is also starting to put in charging infrastructure in your service territory, right? So you're setting that groundwork, you're doing that baseline work. Okay, and then you move into fleet electrification from there. So you've started that process in stage one, you go into fleet electrification. So typically what I'm looking for when I'm talking to a utility to see if they're ready for a fleet electrification program, ideally they have done a little bit of market research, they understand who their customers are, maybe they even have customers coming to them telling them that they're ready for this or wanting this. There's been a little bit of work done already around interconnection and understanding like all of that process flow, starting to even think about like what pieces we want to incentivize. Do we want to incentivize charging infrastructure? Do we want to incentivize like as far as like a transformer upgrade in the cases where we need that? So that's what I'm usually looking for. Now, Colorado, you're great because you have this whole coalition where you're thinking about this. So I think that you're actually in a great place to start doing fleet electrification. I'm going to pick it up from here very quickly. When you go from fleet electrification, you can start thinking about managing those assets, right? Now that you have that EV load, you can start managing it. Okay, we can keep going, Jake. Okay. I don't think I need to spend too much time here. These next couple of slides are just for your sake. So if you want to look at these slides after the fact, those would be great. But just like in case you're curious about some rebate programs that we have or even grant programs, there's some information here. So let's skip the slide. There's a fleet electrification program that I did want to mention. So another one that we're doing is in Jacksonville. So different from the one that we're doing in Colorado, at JEA, we have a lot of flexibility, right? So JEA came to us and said, hey, we want to do fleet electrification, but we want to only do it if it makes sense. So what was really interesting about JEA is that they said, show us that there will be a return on investment for investing in fleet electrification. Tommy, I know you're running this program. Do you want to add anything to that? And then Matt, it looks like you have a thought.
I just wanted to note, this is less investing in fleet electrification and more they were asking about investing in developing a fleet electrification program, right?
So
like a technical systems program.
Go ahead, Tommy, and I can add to it.
Yeah, so one of the things that Chris was referencing is when JEA came with the program, the fleet electrification program, they wanted to be cost effective for JEA. So it's doing the fleet conversion plans and having projected load. So we reference it as achieved. So it's the concept of load that will be hitting the grid. Unfortunately, it's not an immediate load, which we found to be a little bit interesting. So we have two different methodologies by which we do this. We have a service level 1 and a service level 2. Service level 1 is going to be a fleet that's either a smaller fleet or a fleet that doesn't need a lot of assistance, but they may just need that line of communication between electric services and getting them on the grid and making sure that that's moving along. So what I would say with that is we found that those SL1s, they have infrastructure installed, and JEA is going to see that hit the grid pretty quickly. So from that perspective, their turn time in their benefit is pretty quick because they're going to be on the grid, pulling power and doing those kind of things. The other one, which would be the SL2, those are where we do a fleet conversion plan. So we're giving them an idea of what it would look like to do a conversion. So it'd be, what would that projection look like? What's their cost effectiveness? What's their greenhouse gas emission reduction? All those different things. What they're finding with that is that we are projecting out multiple years, so they're able to plan for it. But ultimately, they're seeing a payback, a cost benefit from the report, and that's actually part of our reporting with them, is to show them what is the cost effectiveness of this report. So the cost of the report compared to how much they expect to get from a load perspective. So that's a big part of what JEA is using this program as, is primarily from a cost effective strategy for the utility themselves. Did that answer your question, Matt? And I may have gone a roundabout way to do it. Sorry about that.
Yes.
Looks like we have.
Fahad, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Tommy. A quick question is, with the JEA, are you guys working with their customers, or is it internal to the utility where you're trying to provide them with this expertise?
Yeah, great question. So we're working with their customers specifically, their JEA customers. So we work with different parts. We've worked with the city of Jacksonville, so here in Jacksonville, in Duval County, and we've also worked with, and I have a hard time just saying Duval County, by the way. I don't know if anybody knows. Never mind. I'll keep moving. We've worked with City of Jacksonville. We've worked with some nonprofit. Thank you, Matt. Some nonprofits that are like Feeding Northeast Florida. Some others with that. We've worked with a lot of actually electrical contractors. We've worked with a remediation company called ServPro. So we've worked with a couple of different ones there. We've also worked with Amazon, but Amazon would be considered one of those SL1s. They're ones that would be more of a support mechanism to get them connected with the utility. Just making sure that there's communication between the utility and Amazon to make sure that the facility is going to be able to move, progress effectively through that process. But we worked with the JEA customers predominantly for that. And we did actually do a fleet conversion for JEA as well to show them what it would look like for them to do a conversion and when they should replace which vehicles and all those things.
So were you up for customer acquisition, or was it predetermined as to who and which ones were you engaging with? And another follow-up question is this a paid-for program by the utility, or are customers that are engaging with this program paying some whatever nominal fee or if it's a subscription-based fee? Thank you.
Yeah, you're setting me up, and I appreciate it. This is great. So the first one I would say is this is so we go out and do that outreach ourselves. There are a few, like for instance, JEA, we didn't have to go out and reach out to. They gave us that one. We do have predominantly for the rest of them, we've been going out actively with our outreach team. So I'm the program manager from our side. Our outreach rep is Scott. He actually is the one that goes out and meets with the different customers. He uses a lot of councils and different connections to get with the customers, but we are to bring our own leads in. We actually have attempted to use JEA's resources via marketing and emails. We found it to be, unfortunately, not very successful for us. We've sent out multiple marketing campaigns and really have only gotten a very small amount, maybe 2 that have come in. And most of the other ones, which we have had up to, I think we've had 12 so far. They've all been from in office, like us going out and reaching out to the customers. And that's primarily for the fleet conversion plans. For the SL ones, we're primarily getting connected when it comes to an account executive. We're working with them to communicate what exactly we can do to offer support to those customers. And then the second question that you had was about the cost. So the fleet conversion plan side, that cost is something that utility covers. So there is a stipulation that JEA has for it, and it's called an implementation clause, which says that they would implement something within 12 to 24 months. They don't have to do exactly what the fleet conversion plan says, but they have to take a honest step towards going to an electric vehicle. That could be a charger, that could be a vehicle, that could be a number of things. But the idea behind the implementation is to reduce free ridership. All right, I think, is it okay if I'm going to hand it back over to you, Chris, to keep going, or is that all right? And if anybody has any more questions, please feel free to raise your hand. Thanks, Chris.
All right, I'm going to zip through this next slide though, Jake. So the next one is just like kind of reiterating that we can also do kind of that grid optimization piece after fleet electrifications. So again, this slide is for the audience to take a look at in your own time. So let's move on to the next section. So some of the things that we want to talk about here are just some of the additional considerations that you should have before you pull the trigger on fleet electrification, right? So obviously there's going to be differences between municipalities, co-ops, and investor-owned utilities, right? But then there are these common benefits amongst all of those, right? So I think we all understand here that EVs represent a great opportunity for you and your utility, right? So this is a new revenue stream, whereas a lot of us have our backgrounds in energy efficiency, which has been reducing load. This is a new load that's being added back to the grid. Now that we're having conversations about data centers might dwarf this new load, but even then, EV growth is still substantial and it should not be ignored, right? And with that being said, we should be doing some of that work ahead of time to think about the load forecast, so the new load that's going to be added to your grid, and the grid optimization opportunities that come with that. This is typically going to be a load that is very easy to control, especially if you get in on the ground floor and you help to incentivize putting in charging stations that are smart, for instance, things that you can integrate. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I just want to add, Chris, that we've got, obviously, I think you all know the saying, but when you've met one muni or one co-op, you've met one muni or one co-op. So
exactly.
And I know that Craig would say the same. So I just want to flag that, there are some utilities in Colorado that are actively pushing for fleet electrification, and or for electric vehicles, let's say. And there are some that are not necessarily actively pushing, but want to make sure that for EVs that are going to be deployed in their territories, whether for fleet or otherwise, that they are able to manage that load in the best way possible, and preferably make it, so that it even reduces costs for customers, or keeps them even at the same time. So some are actively pushing for more electric vehicles, some are not, but are still interested in managing the load in the best way possible and knowing what load could potentially be coming, down the line. So just to kind of flag that for your own perspective.
Yeah, that's perfect, Matt. And actually, Tommy is going to talk about this in a second. But one of the things that we typically recommend is kind of doing a market study. So getting ahead of like what is coming, right? Okay, just real quick before I cap this off, but I just wanted to mention too that there's an emissions reduction component that we shouldn't ignore here. Now, I know that every utility has like their own goals and their own priorities when it comes to this, but just recognizing that this is a GHG emissions reduction opportunity. And then something that Tommy has mentioned to me multiple times with his program is that like this offers like really good press and really good engagement with your customers. So you end up having like a really good reputation with them, especially with those community electrification programs that we have. Those grant programs generally like produce a lot of positive press for your utility, build relationships. So that's the last thing that I wanted to mention on here. But of course, the resiliency piece cannot be ignored. So managing that new load, that grid optimization piece, cannot understate that. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I'll hand it over to you, Tommy, to talk about market analysis.
So this is just some feedback that we've had from, and Matt, I want to reference like what you said. I'm referencing one municipality that referenced a lot of this, but it's identifying some items before deciding if you're going to go this direction. And that's where the market analysis comes in. So first is your potential for electrification. That can be through DMV data, that can be through a number of different data sources. But the idea is how many vehicles are you having come either online or registered in your area each year? That was a good way to identify what is the potential for electrification. What percentage is electric now? What percentage could be in the future? And then looking at growth over time. That's been the most beneficial way for us to tell. Is our past will tell us our future in many instances. So then the next one we have is our grid impacts. Is identifying where these vehicles are that are getting electrified, understanding how that affects the grid, and where are your weak points within the grid, which I know many municipalities, the electric services department, they memorize their grid, they know their grid. It's a matter of helping them identify where some potential pitfalls within that grid that could have an impact from the electrification. And that would be from proposing where those vehicles are going to be converted, potentially, especially with fleets and things. The other one would be the financial benefits. So that would be identifying what would your expected growth be with these different electric vehicles based off of maybe averages. You're not going to be able to get like exact mileages from a lot of these vehicles, but what you can get is an average of what you expect them to drive to then identify what your potential growth would be. So those are some different market analysis items. And then determining potential incentives if you want to have them. So if you want to drive it, then having incentives for it. If you don't want to drive it, not having the incentives for it. So those are different opportunities. One thing I know that we will be talking a little bit about is just really understanding from an advisory standpoint, being that communication with the customers. Jake, if you don't mind moving to the next one. Yes, Matt, go right ahead.
And Tommy, I just want to add as well is that we had a chance to hear from JA actually like a year or two ago. I think you both might have been on the call, but they at that time they also shared a almost like a rate formula, like a formula that they put together basically to show what their payback period was, what their TCO was, how many kilowatt hours they needed to break even. And then they also spoke to the fact that part of it was just wanting to be able to have fleets actually proactively reaching out to them to know how many fleets are in their territory, since obviously, maybe utilities know C&I customers, but not so much fleets because they might be a small customer right now. So, if you wanted to speak to any of that about how JA looked at, kilowatt hours and break even and motivations. So anyway, just flagging.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. That is definitely something that's where that cost effectiveness report is based off of JEA's. Like whenever we do a fleet conversion plan, we provide a cost effective calculation for it to show what is the cost over time, what's the net present value currently for the fleet conversion plan compared to what their expected growth would be over time. And so that net present value shows if it's a cost effective report. What we're finding is that not every report is cost effective, but if you look at the program as a whole, it'll be cost effective. And the reasoning behind it is sometimes you need the smaller fleets to convert to then promote for other fleets to then do the conversion as well. Because we're seeing that you kind of get that wave going where you get a couple of vehicles out in the road and then it starts increasing. So just to give one example is we did have a big fleet convert We have a bunch of Amazon vans, delivery vans. And what we're finding is a lot more interest when we're talking to customers because they've seen these vans out there, and they're pretty obvious to see the difference between the Rivian and the regular vans that they have. So we're seeing that on this end as well. But we are from like you said, the cost effectiveness, we provide that as a way to show what is the cost effective strategy for this over time, because the payback, it does take, time. It takes time and mileage for them to get payback. So Matt, thank you for bringing that up. So a couple opportunities and challenges real quick was the initial infrastructure install. That's been a challenge with customers is I know this seems pretty obvious, but the cost to install infrastructure up front on commercial properties, it can be pretty large. So helping with any utility transformer side items can be helpful for customers. What we're also finding is that many fleets are willing to allow their employees to drive their vehicles home. So we're seeing that at-home infrastructure is a pretty effective measure because it is more cost effective for the customer, and it also distributes power across the grid instead of it being more isolated. I don't know if that would help out with much. The charging infrastructure availability. So for customers who are needing to charge, so if this would be for your residential customers as well as potentially fleet customers, is helping them identify where they can charge their vehicles, especially if they're in rental properties or areas where they cannot install a charger. So one thing that I know that JEA has been really pushing, and some municipalities and IOUs in the market have been pushing, is helping with code transitions. So using hoping to get added into the building code a 240 volt outlet in the garage to help with allowing for charging to take place and whenever somebody has a vehicle. So just some different avenues to go with that. The next one would be our load growth, right time and location. So we want to identify when do customers want to charge? When do we want them to charge from a utility perspective? Do we want to charge? We want them to charge overnight at different times, because what we're finding is if we can direct them to off peak right now, but as that grows and you can provide an incentive to get them to do so, it could be that we're creating a new peak. So those are different opportunities that can be evaluated, but the benefit of the incentive is you can modify it if you wanted to.
And Tommy,
there
was a comment from Matt too. I think we should just quickly voice this over. So Matt is asking,
go ahead.
Are we considering the payback or the cost effectiveness for the fleet customer or for the utility, right? And so when you're talking about cost effectiveness, can you just talk a little bit more about that? Who that's for?
Yeah, certainly. So the cost effectiveness for the report is going to be for the utility. So that's what we're looking for from the utility side, is we're trying to tell them is to show, is it cost effective for the utility that they paid for this report? For the customer, we are looking for what their transition schedule, like what they would be comfortable with also focusing on what would be cost effective for them. So one of the stipulations that we have in our program is if you cannot, if we run a report and we find that it's not cost effective for a customer to convert, then we will, they don't have that implementation clause. So they don't need to convert. And so from a JEA perspective, they want their customers to make good decisions. They don't want to just say, hey, go electric no matter what. So from the report standpoint, it's to promote the electrification and letting the customer know. But in terms of the cost of the report, that's the cost strategy that we're trying to promote to JEA, saying it is cost effective for you to pay for this report for this customer because you'll get the payback on it in the long run, because they wouldn't have converted if they didn't have a report that presented it to them. And I've had many customers. We actually are working with a school district right now that is interested in it, but have no idea what to do. And so that would be a prime customer that we would be coming in to help them understand what it would look like for them to convert their vehicles. And these are not buses. These would be their other cars. Their buses are already being converted for some, but it would be like what they call their white fleet. Fahad, you had a question?
Yeah, sorry for keep badgering you with questions, but I wanted to ask, so when you go and reach out to these customers, you said that you have a dedicated resource that is doing outreach efforts. Do you then have to get those customers qualified by JEA so that they can then allocate the funding for them, for you guys to conduct an analysis for them? Or is it that you bring those customers in and then do an analysis based on the offering that JEA has as a utility to them?
So they have to be qualified in terms of they have to be a JEA customer, and their facility where they're going to put infrastructure has to be within the JEA territory. So those two things are required. And then we do have a budget for how many we can do, how many fleet conversion plans that we're allowed to do. So as long as we're within that budget that they presented, which is the cost-effective strategy, to show what our estimated amount of load that we would grow from a goal perspective compared to the cost of the fleet conversion plans. Those are the different strategies that are being used right now. Is we have been given a budget. It's not that anybody can do it. There also is a limit. So you have to have 5 vehicles or more in our program. And that number may change over the next couple of years to make it a higher number, to make it more cost effective.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And then the initial design. And so just as a response to your question, Matt, so the answer to that question is the design and the whole report and everything included in the cost effectiveness? And the answer is yes. So the program as a whole, the goals that we have to meet each year are a kilowatt per hour amount. I mean, it goes in the megawatts, but kilowatt per hour goal that we meet is to pay back the entire program, not just the fleet conversion plans. So it's from the incentive that we offer, it's from the fleet conversion plans, it's from the implementation side of the program. So all of it together, it has to have a cost-effective measure, and that's what our calculation is based off for the whole thing. We do each conversion plan as one cost-effective strategy, and then we do the entire program as a separate one. And with us meeting the goals, we've exceeded the goals so far each year, which blessing for that. But if we continue with that route, then it would be cost-effective over time for JEA. I'm going to keep moving because I know I slowed us down. So Jake, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you, sir.
Yep, no worries. And I'll be real quick here just so we can get to some Q&A. And feel free to jump in as well. But we wanted to speak a little bit to our Colorado specific programs as well that we're working on. The first one is this Xcel Energy Fleet Electrification Advisory Program. So we launched this in June of this year. It is technically FEEP 2.0. So we're the second group to run this program for Xcel. There are a lot of lessons learned from FEEP 1.0 that have been implemented in FEEP 2.0. Primarily, most of that is around infrastructure, right? Most companies that were worked with in FEEP 1.0 just wanted a lot more information about that infrastructure side of things. So their electrical availability, how is it going to change their price, their electric cost, what was available from like a grant and incentive perspective, which the Energy Office has been great at helping us kind of put together what that suite of offerings is across the state. Just to give a quick rundown on what the program actually is, you must be an Xcel Electric customer. That may sound obvious, but we have a lot of people that just use Xcel for gas transport, and they also call in asking about the program. It is a completely free program for Colorado and New Mexico customers, so they don't pay a dime to be a part of this program. But they must have or be planning to have at least 5 vehicles that provides goods or services. That's a very broad term, right? A school bus provides a service. A delivery, suite of delivery vehicles provides a good. So it's really anyone that is using those vehicles as a part of their business operations, right? So this is just trying to kind of like filter out some of the folks that might just have some cars that they're keeping at home that are like a executive bonus or something along those lines. We really want these fleets to be providing some kind of service, right? So that also includes, we're working with some like mobility companies right now, our mobility nonprofits. We're working with municipalities, we're working with private companies, all sorts of different companies are allowed to be in this program, but you must already have a vehicle set or be planning on getting a vehicle set soon. What this actually provides for those customers is a 5-year and a 10-year implementation option in their strategic plan that includes vehicle options, necessary infrastructure, and total cost of ownership. This also includes an online dashboard that they can log into, which people have been really liking. And then finally, since we've launched this program in June, we've already had 8 enrollees, so over just about 3 months here. They have mostly come in through joint outreach, right? So us and Excel are working together heavily to make sure that we're going out and finding these folks that would be good participants in the program and that we're providing some kind of value to them. So we are working in conjunction with Excel on community events and interfacing with groups like this and talking to anyone across the state that we can to kind of build out that network and build out that education piece. So different organizations within the state know that this option is available and that these people have access to a free program like this. I always joke the hardest part about selling a program like this is convincing people it's actually free. And that's really the education that we're trying to spread here and get people to understand that this is a benefit for Excel, it's a benefit for us, and it's a benefit for these end users. It's really a win-win-win kind of scenario. We also work on a Efficiency Works Fleet EV program. This one is very different than the Excel program. So that Excel program is a sole contract that we have with Excel to provide that Fleet EV program. In Efficiency Works territory, there's a service provider network that folks are able to tap into. So they can call in, go to the website, and find a company that they can work with. We're one of those service providers, but they have the option to choose from everybody. So there's a little bit more flexibility there. It is different in that there are a lot more eligibility requirements as well. There's all sorts of different things when it comes to, like, you have to own the building and own the electric account and have this many vehicles. And I did put a link in here for when this presentation gets sent out, because it's just that those eligibility requirements are really long and it's way too much to put on one slide. But that program also provides these incentives that you can see here in the bottom left of the page, depending on your site. So it's not guaranteed to be a free program because the service providers are kind of allowed to charge what they want. So we could come in and say, there's a tier 2 assessment, so you get $20,000. We think it's going to cost $30,000, so you need to pay us $10,000 to make up the difference. We haven't done that. These have been. We think that these costs are very reasonable. These incentives are super reasonable for the level of effort that goes into this planning. But that's kind of how this program differs from the Excel program. It's a much different type of program. And Efficiency Works went into detail on this in the last CEVC meeting, so I won't go too much into it. But we absolutely can help folks get enrolled into this program. And Elena Hawley, who presented last month, is also incredibly good at explaining this, a lot better than I am. So, yeah, Fahad.
Is this incentive that's mentioned in the last line, is it incentive for the organization or the CNI customer that you're working with, or is it the cost of doing that assessment for that customer? It's
the incentive offered to the NCNI customer.
Okay.
So they would basically sign up with a service provider. That service provider would say, this assessment's going to be $30,000, right? And however that service provider gets paid is up to the way the CNI customer wants to do it. So if they want to just give them $30,000 and wait for this incentive to come through, or they want to make an agreement where they can get they want to get the incentive first and sign it directly over to the service provider. However they really want to do that at the end of the day. So think of it as it's like a rebate, essentially.
Okay.
You get that money back. Yep. Whether you pay it up front first or you sign over the rebate, however they want to do that. But at the end of the day, what these programs are really getting at is this final technical report, right? And what our technical report provides in either of these PRPA or Excel programs is, this at a glance piece, so you can just look at it and kind of get an idea of what we analyzed and what the results are. We go through our scope and methodologies to be transparent about everything. And then, the bulk of the report is this fleet conversion plan that includes TCO, grants, and incentives that are available. We try to do a 5-year and 10-year transition plan in these documents so people can get a better idea of, all right, we need to do this now. Does it make sense to do it really quickly? Does it make sense to take it a little bit longer, which is entirely different from customer to customer? The conversion process, what that actually would look like, what are the electrical impacts to their panels and their electrical availability, and what kind of GHG emission reductions they should see from implementing a plan like this. We also help with the vehicle procurement piece. So there's going to be different models and makes in that report that we think would be reasonable for their specific kind of needs, as well as what charging infrastructure they would need, locations, utility rate, how it would affect their utility rates, et cetera. And then since we have this big data set on vehicles, we're also kind of just looking at how we can enhance that fleet. If we notice that there's a vehicle that would make much more sense in a different vehicle's place, based on routing and the age of the vehicle, all sorts of different things. We'll kind of make recommendations around that too. So it's not just switch this car to this. It's also, hey, consider this operational. It's a little bit more of an operational look and impact. And that's about it for the presentation. So we're happy to stay on and do some Q&A here.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you all so much. Really appreciate you digging deep into there. And I know I kind of threw you off with timing a little bit by asking questions in between. But yeah, if you want to go ahead and stop sharing, Jake, is it okay to share the presentation afterwards? The
Absolutely.
slide decks?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
great.
Absolutely. And I also did want to note, Matt, Tony from JEA, who developed that cost benefit analysis for their utility, is actually an RIT member now. He was actually going to be at this presentation, but he's up in the air on a flight right now.
All right.
So he definitely has a lot more details on that as well. If anyone would like to reach out, I can put his contact info in the chat.
Great. Well, yeah, really appreciate it. And we've got a few minutes left. So does anybody else have any questions to ask the team? All right. No, in particular, I guess I will throw one thing out there just quickly before we pass it back to the RI folks. But Eric, if you have a moment, if you don't mind, I know Black Hills Energy has a technical assistance program as well, in case you wanted to speak to that at all. Okay, not hearing it, but yeah. So to the RI team, if you have any other items you want to kind of close out with, appreciate all of the insights.
Yeah, absolutely, Matt. I think the only thing that we'd probably want to drill home is just kind of that it always makes sense to start, as people consider doing these programs, it always makes sense to start with that kind of market characterization analysis that Tommy went over. I just wanted to double drill that home that, we do find that to be an extremely effective step in helping design a program that specifically fits your needs, and that's really the key piece here. As you said, it really, every utility is entirely different. Everyone's community that they're working with is entirely different. So it's really important to understand where that community sits with vehicles, turn that into a pilot program, and then keep learning from there. These programs are ever evolving year to year. And so it's really important to get as much data on the front end as you possibly can.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jake. I also would like to triple hammer home that, like, just being open to reevaluating how the program is going, setting those metrics at the beginning, but yeah, just being completely open to redesigning the program if you have to. And that's been, I think, part of our success so far with these programs.
I think something else I would just bring up is I know, a lot of utilities, the folks on the call are thinking about those considerations that were mentioned about incentivizing using charging at certain times, incentivizing things about charge management, time of use rates. So, it sounds like that is another opportunity where even if you don't put in an incentive for installing a charger, that could be something that a utility could build into their fleet technical assistance program, where they say, hey, if you want to participate in this program and get technical support, you need to agree that if you install charging, A, B, C, D, that benefits that utility's grid. Is that correct in that type of way? Have you seen that before?
If you guys don't mind if I take this one. So one thing that we found with the fleet conversion plans for a commercial perspective, we're seeing, we go over demand charges. So we show what the demand charges are. So there's benefit there, right? So you don't have to incentivize the commercial side, but the residential side, we actually are we're not a time of use rate. We're just a standard rate. We actually have 2 tiers now, but ultimately we're a standard rate with 2 tiers. And so with that being the case, there's no incentive for residents in this area to charge off peak. So that's where the incentive comes in, is it's to show them that. Now, if you're in a time of use rate area, I think it's education. Personally, I think education would be the key there, is to show them, hey, if you charge at the times when it's beneficial to us, it's also beneficial to you. So I think that could be a really good, so Matt, I think that's a really good point. I think just identifying your market and what's the best way to help that customer. And I think it comes down to education, because I think many customers may just not even understand what you mean by charging at off-peak kind of thing.
Yeah, and Matt, I just want to mention that pilot, that V2G pilot that I'm doing in Chicago, we're kind of simulating it right now, where we have these 3 school districts enrolled. We want them to charge their buses at a certain time and then discharge at a certain time. So we give them kind of an incentive that would kind of emulate them avoiding costs by doing like a time of use rate. So right now there is not a time of use rate that they're on for these V2G programs. We are trying to design it based off the data that we're getting. And so if these buses charge off peak and then discharge during peak hours, they get like a participation incentive. So.
Yeah, because in a way, that's an incentive that they are paying less, but it's not being paid out by the utility, right? So they're getting an incentive, but the utility isn't paying for it. So
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, appreciate everybody's time. I know we're at time now, and that you all included some of your contact info in the chat. Again, just a reminder, Black Hills Energy has an offering for technical assistance as well. So if you're interested, I included the link in the chat. That is managed by Drive Clean Colorado, the Clean Cities organization here in the state. And then Resource Innovations now manages the Fleet Electrification Advisory Program offered by Excel, as well as is one of the providers for the Platte River Power Authority offering. And I will send out the slides afterwards along with the recording. And that is everything. So appreciate everybody's time. Appreciate the team joining and sharing all of that information. And I will follow up after.
Thanks for having us, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.